When engineers copy amazing technology from the living world, are they plagiarizing the creator?
This week on Creation Magazine Live, engineers and inventors copying designs from the living world. Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. I'm Richard Fangrad.
And I'm Calvin Smith.
What does the head of a bird have to do with bullet train design?
Well, designers copied the shape of a bird's head to reduce some of the problems with their own designs.
That's right. This week we're talking about examples of biomimetics. As the name suggests, biomimetics involves mimicking or copying designs that we see in nature, designs that you see in the biological world. And there are many examples of this. For example, the geometric eyes of lobsters have inspired X-ray telescope design. And the amazing properties of spider silk, like spider webs essentially, chemists have looked at that and developed things like Kevlar, very strong materials. And that's what we're talking about when we're looking at biomimetics, copying designs found in nature.
That's right. So let's look at some of these examples. Japan's bullet trains travel up to 320 kilometers an hour. That's 200 miles an hour. It's pretty amazing. However, trains that are coming out of tunnels at those speeds make a very loud noise, like a thunderclap, caused by the change in air pressure when exiting, of course, and this is kind of annoys local residents that live nearby.
Right.
So bullet train chief engineer Eiji Nakatsu himself asked, is there something in nature that travels quickly and smoothly between two very different mediums? And avid bird watcher, Nakatsu thought of the design of the kingfisher that dives into the water for fish with very little splash. Copying the shape of the bird's head to remodel the front of the bullet train resulted in a quieter train. And it actually uses 15% less electricity while traveling 10% faster than before.
Oh, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
it travels faster, uses less electricity, and that annoying
Thunderclap sound.
bang, the thunder-like sound is reduced by
Yeah.
looking at things in the living world. That's, Nakatsu recognized that the design in nature, and this is often, well, nature has done this and so on,
Right.
but he recognized that that design was worth copying. And the thing is, that design didn't come about by itself. Here's an engineer who recognized design in nature. Design in nature requires a designer in the same way that man-made design requires a designer. And the Bible tells us who the designer is, of course. There's no secret about that.
Right. Jesus is the creator. In Colossians 1:15 to 18, we read, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent."
Yeah, so for us, for Bible-believing Christians, copying designs that God put in nature, put in living things, makes sense.
Right.
It makes sense even from a scientific perspective. In Genesis 1:28, we read about the dominion mandate, where Adam and Eve are told to subdue the earth. And there's some other terminology there. Scientists have long recognized that as the basis for doing some science, actually, the basis for science. We want to look at what God has done and, in a sense, mimic that to make life better. That's one of the goals of science.
Right.
The early scientists like Newton and Kepler and so on, science was seen as a means of fulfilling God's command to subdue the earth, Genesis 1:28. Kepler and other early scientists, I think Kepler was the one who coined the term, we're thinking God's thoughts after him.
Right.
And I like that.
Yeah.
We're thinking God's thoughts after him. Here God has created this amazing capability in this animal or this thing we see in God's creation. And we're thinking God's thoughts after him. Well, how does this work? And how can we use it to develop technology that would that would better life on Earth.
Right, he's gone before us, and we're just copying what's already been done.
Yes.
Now, classically, science's main goal has been building knowledge and understanding, regardless of its potential applications. It's just people learning about the natural world,
Right.
what we call the natural world. However, increasingly, scientific research is undertaken with the explicit goal of solving a problem or developing a technology, right? We live in a sin-cursed world, and we're going to try to overcome some of the problems.
Right. Things like developing antibiotics to heal diseases and get rid of bacteria, trains that make less noise, like we were just talking about.
Right.
More efficient use of the Earth's resources and things like that. Those are all examples of biomimetics, of using what we see there to build a better world for ourselves. And that's the biblical mandate from Genesis.
In recent years, NASA probes have sent back images of our nearest planet, Mars. These images have prompted some scientists to suggest that a global flood once carved the Martial landscape, even though no liquid water has yet been found. The Bible records an event that certainly sounds like a global flood on Earth. Genesis records that all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. Jesus himself, referring to those not on Noah's Ark, said, "The flood came and took them all away." Unlike the elusive water on Mars, water covers 70% of the Earth's surface, and water-deposited sedimentary rock covers much of the land surface. So isn't it strange that many people who are open to the possibility of a global flood on Mars, despite the absence of water, immediately dismiss any suggestion that a global flood occurred on Earth?
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Well, if you just tuned in today, we're talking about examples of biomimetics,
Yes.
which is copying designs from the biological world. And if you want to know more about this, you can go to our website and check out an article, creation.com/biomimetics, and it'll get into even more deeply to what we're talking about here. Now, the mantis shrimp. It's got incredible eyes, some of those incredible eyes in the animal world. The shrimp's eyes have a technology that's similar to what is found in CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray players, but actually way better than that technology.
Right. Each eye can move independently and can focus on an object with 3 different areas, giving the mantis shrimp trinocular vision. I mean, we've got binocular vision, you get 2 eyes and that kind of thing. Now, we perceive depth best with 2 eyes. If you cover up one eye, it's a little hard to perceive depth. But
Right.
the mantis shrimp can do that with just one of its eyes, because it has 3 different parts on each eye that can triangulate position and stuff. But it gets even better than that. They can see more of the spectrum than our eyes, from infrared to ultraviolet. They can tune individual light-sensitive cells depending on light levels. If it's dark or if it's light, they can tune the different cells. Now, what makes them unique is their ability to distinguish between light that's polarized in different directions, including circularly polarized light. And as far as researchers know, they have the only cells in the animal kingdom that can detect polarized light and different types of polarized light. And that's the kind of technology that's found, as you just said, in CD players, DVD players, and Blu-ray players. The thing is, it's far beyond our current technology.
What we can do. Researcher Nicholas Roberts from the University of Bristol said, "The cool thing is, I think it's actually something you could make, and it would improve the workings of current technologies such as Blu-ray, which uses multiple wavelengths of light, and of future data storage devices." And for more, you can see about this DVD makers copy mantis shrimp eye design in the article creation.com/mantis-shrimp-eye, and that'll get into some more detail.
So there's just one amazing example of, here's this shrimp that lives lives in the ocean and has these amazing eyes, and people kind of scratch their heads and think, well, why do they need eyes that good and stuff?
Right.
It just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of reminds me of the creativity of the creator.
Right.
He gave these amazing eyes to a shrimp, just incredible. But there's so much else involved in biomimetics. If you go to Google, just just search on the World Wide Web, biomimetics. There's websites, biomimetics different websites.
Right.
I forget them right now, but just incredible examples. Spider silk. Let's talk about that. In 2001, one of our scientists wrote an article on the amazing properties of spider silk, so spider webs. And he was comparing it to what chemists were using to make Kevlar for bulletproof vests. Now, in 2013, a Japanese company called Spyber announced that it was beginning to mass produce synthetically made spider silk with genetically engineered bacteria. So they're making spider silk, they're making this stuff.
That's right. Now the material they're making is actually tougher than Kevlar, strong as steel, lighter than carbon fiber, and it can be stretched 40% beyond what its original length is without breaking.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and so, I mean, what's the big deal about spider silk really? But artificial silk could be used to create artificial blood vessels and ligaments, as well as dissolvable sutures. For centuries, silk was used to dress wounds because of its antibacterial properties.
Right.
In the auto industry, it could lead to bumpers that can absorb a very large amount of energy on impact, improving driver safety. All sorts of uses for this, this
the
product.
potentials are huge. Spider silk owes its amazing properties to a protein called fibroin. The proteins are catalysts for most chemical reactions in the cell. They help bind cells together to make the various tissues. But the complex sequence of amino acids making up fibroin, engineers are having a tough, or chemists are having a tough time recreating this in a lab. In a spider farm where you have a gazillion spiders trying to, it just wouldn't work to produce enough for industrial use. This Japanese company is using genetically engineered bacteria to produce fibroin, which is then turned into a fine powder and spun. The bacteria are fed sugar and salt and some other micronutrients, and they can reproduce in just 20 minutes.
Right. A single gram of the protein produces about 5.6 miles, 9 kilometers of artificial silk. And this year, in 2015, they plan on being able to produce 10 metric tons of silk per year.
Incredible.
The vigorous promotion of evolution as established fact is causing many Christians to question the biblical creation account, and some non-Christians won't consider Christianity because they believe the Bible has been disproved by science. That's where Creation Magazine comes in. Creation Magazine is a family-friendly publication packed with cutting-edge science that supports the Bible, presented in an easy-to-understand format by some of the leading experts in their fields of study. Visit creation.com to subscribe today.
This week we're talking about biomimetics, and this is engineers copying designs in nature. And there are some amazing advances made in man-made technology, our technology, by looking at things in the modern world. We talked about spider silk. If you want more information on that, go to creation.com/spider silk. Amazing things there with spider silk happening, apparently. So,
and other bugs too, like termites. Yeah. they're often associated with destroying homes, not helping to design them. But the Eastgate office building here in Harare, Zimbabwe, has an air conditioning system modeled after the self-cooling mounds of termites. Termites keep the temperature inside the nest to within 1 degree day and night, while the temperatures outside swing from 42 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius. So huge difference there, but they manage to keep their homes within 1 degree.
It's incredible.
Of what they want, yeah. The insects do this by constantly opening and closing vents throughout the mound to manage convection currents of air cooler. Now, the cooler air is drawn in from open lower sections, while hot air escapes through the chimneys.
Now, the operation of buildings, it apparently represents 40% of all the energy used by humanity.
Wow.
So this understanding how can we build buildings like the one in Africa there, based on that. Well, the building in Africa there uses 90% less energy for ventilation than conventional buildings its size, and it's already saved the building owners $3.5 million in air conditioning costs.
Amazing.
It's just incredible. Now, for more information, you go to creation.com/termite mounds and get a bit more information there. There's another great example of, look at what's happening with these termite mounds here, these piles of mud essentially, but they're doing incredible things. How can we use that design to make life better for ourselves?
Yeah. Fireflies.
Fireflies.
Yeah, researchers have studied fireflies and applied the design discovered there to LED lights.
Okay.
And normally when light passes through a boundary between different materials, of course you lose some of the light, it's lost through reflection, right? And this can be minimized through a process called optical impedance matching.
Right, okay. So it turns out that the cuticles on fireflies, that's the bit that the light needs to shine through, they have a very fine structure that does exactly that. It's not totally smooth, there's a little bumpiness there on a very, very small scale. There's tiny ridges 150 nanometers in width, 110 nanometers in height, and the period, the distance between the ridges, is 250 nanometers. Now, a nanometer, 1 inch, is 25.4 million nanometers, just to get an idea for size here. Yeah. But it turns out that that pattern in the cuticle is that those are the best dimensions to transmit the most light at the light that the Firefly puts out. It's an incredible design, again, and that has been applied to making more efficient LED lenses in front of the LED lights. Let's more light out. Now, for a bit more information, go to creation.com/firefly, and you can get some more details on that. Amazing research there.
Right. Of course, that's on our website, creation.com, but a report on this amazing biotechnology you can find elsewhere, of course, made the usual fact-free homage to evolution, claiming efficient versions of these nanostructures have been selected over hundreds of millions of years. The way they explain it's always evolution. I mean, let's think about this. When I was being taught evolution in school, I was taught that, creatures, if whatever you develop provides a survival advantage to you, that's going to get retained and et cetera.
Okay.
I mean, if you're a bug and you start glowing and announce to everybody, here I am, here I am, here I am. I mean, what's the survival advantage here? We think they're beautiful. We think they're kind of cool. My kids love fireflies and stuff. We used to go out and watch them. But what evolutionary advantage is that too?
There's always that spin put on just about everything in the news, right? You have that in textbooks and in the media and movies, and it's everywhere, the evolutionary spin that's placed on the data. Right. But the practical research used design principles. For these LEDs, it used design principles to duplicate those nanostructures.
Right.
There was engineers, there were smart guys working on how to duplicate these things that they needed intelligence, they applied design.
Yeah,
we could ask.
It's like in wartime, when the enemy develops like a code machine, and so you try to figure out how to do that because they've designed it, and now you've got to figure out and copy their design so you can understand how it's done. We know that comes from intelligence. So to continually put this evolutionary spin on it actually doesn't make sense from what the facts do.
No, it doesn't make sense.
Someone might ask, how can you believe in God when there isn't a single shred of evidence? How can you take that leap of faith? But on the contrary, the Bible tells us that the heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. And since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. And perhaps sternly, the Bible tells us that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So the Bible tells us that the evidence for God is everywhere, and it's overwhelming if we just open our eyes to see it. There are many highly qualified scientists today who believe that the Bible's account of creation is true, and that the observable scientific evidence testifies to its accuracy.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Our subject today is biomimetics, developing technology based on God's design.
That's right. Yeah, probably the most famous example of biomimetics is Velcro brand fasteners, right?
Right.
That's, most viewers have probably heard of that. It was invented in 1941 by a Swiss engineer, George de Mestral, who took the idea from burrs that stuck to his dog's fur when they went walking through the forest. And under a microscope, he noted the little hooks and barbs and so on. And that's what he based that on.
That's right. Anything basically with a loop, right, that could get caught on it. Clothing, hair, animal fur. And so that's why he developed Velcro based on that observation.
Yeah, famous example of biomimetics. Probably the coolest application is Velcro jumping, championship Velcro jumping on David Letterman in 1984. He had that on a show there. He had a whole suit of Velcro. I don't know if you've ever seen that. He had a little trampoline, runs along, jumps on the trampoline up against the wall and sticks there. So, just kidding, obviously. There's many other cool applications for Velcro. But self-healing plastics, another example of biomimetics. Self-healing plastics, self-healing materials. Researchers at the Engineering and Sciences Research Council are developing composite materials that bleed resin when stressed or when broken. This is phenomenal stuff. Effectively creating a scab that heals that area, essentially. It's an innovation that could drastically improve air safety and things like that, foster development of lighter aircraft, and essentially they're bringing biomimicry to aviation.
Right, and the way it works is the material is made of hollow fibers filled with epoxy resin. And when the fibers are broken, then the resin leaks out and the seals the break, right? And it's supposedly 80 to 90% of the original strength of this patch. And of course, the epoxy is also colored so that mechanics can easily spot it, and they can say, "Oh, look, there must have been a problem here," and because they see it's gone to work.
And that works much in the same way that when we cut ourselves, there's sticky little cells called platelets that clump together to seal off the blood, and that promotes then the healing can begin there. And that's the principle behind these self-healing plastics. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Exactly. Here's a quote. "This project represents the first step," says Dr. Ian Bond, the aerospace professor leading the research. "We're also developing systems where the healing agent isn't contained in the individual glass fibers, but actually moves around as part of a fully integrated vascular network."
It's incredible.
Just like the circulatory systems found in animals and plants. Such a system could have its healing agent refilled or replaced and could repeatedly heal a structure throughout its lifetime. Furthermore, it offers potential for developing other biological type functions in man-made structures, such as controlling temperatures or distributing energy sources.
Now, this is about slight damage that occurs during flight. Dr. Bond said, "This approach can deal with small-scale damage that's not obvious to the naked eye, but which might lead to very serious failures in structural integrity if it escapes attention." Bond says, "It's intended to complement rather than replace conventional inspection and maintenance routines, which can readily pick up larger scale damage caused by a bird strike, for example."
Right. Of course, sadly, much of the credit, again, goes to nature.
Yes, as
and
always.
Evolution. Typical statements like, "Over millions of years, nature caused this creature to develop this amazing capability," etc. I mean, we see this stuff all the time, and of course, the credit for this amazing technology is being totally misplaced.
Yeah. Now there's good evidence that animals become better adapted to changing environments. Creationists wrote about this long before Darwin. Animals do engineer themselves to become better.
Right.
And there's no doubt that happens.
Yeah, natural selection and programmed variation,
But
etc.
there's limits. That's the thing. There's limits to how far animals can change.
That's right. DNA has shown living things have been programmed by God to be able to adapt to changing environments. Science verifies that. But that programming, like you said, has limitations. And no matter how many times a lizard jumps off a cliff, it's not going to develop genetic information for feathers, because genetic information for feathers does not exist in lizards, and mutations aren't doing that.
Right. DNA becomes more garbled over time, and evolutionists seem to completely ignore that. But it's just amazing. There's design in nature, and we clearly see that.
Right.
Now, we've got some goodies here for you. We've got a free DVD as well, but I'll mention this book first. Buy Refuting Evolution 2, fantastic book, and get this DVD, Biblical Biology 101, for free. Refuting Evolution 2 deals with the attacks on creation from the media, and they're refuted in this book, and you can get a copy of the Basics of Biblical Biology for free. Just use the code CMLBBFree. Just use that code and get the free DVD when you get your copy of Refuting Evolution 2.
Creation.com is the world's most powerful internet resource for finding answers to questions about the origins debate. It includes an online store where you can browse through hundreds of the world's leading creationist books, DVDs, and related materials. Scientists and researchers from around the world have contributed more than 8,000 articles, many of which have appeared in leading creationist publications over more than 30 years. Creation or evolution? When the results are in, which one is supported by scientific observations? Find out at creation.com.
Well, welcome to the feedback section. We've got a person who wrote in and asked us to help defend his Christian beliefs versus a skeptic. And you can look at this up on our website, creation.com/breeding-unicorns. And you'll know what we're talking about here in a second.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So TS wrote in asking us to help him spot the flaw in his friend's reasoning about hybrids, creatures that can hybridize.
Okay.
Hi, a friend of mine told me an interesting discussion he had today with some people at university. He apparently won an argument saying because donkeys and horses have a different number of chromosomes, yet you can crossbreed them to create mules, then you must be able to crossbreed any animal family. He gave the example of a narwhal and a horse creating a unicorn. I argued that because they're from a different family, they can't possibly create offspring, but could not find sufficient evidence to convince him. Any help with this would be appreciated, and CMI's Keaton Halley responded.
Yeah, now here's a question. This is part of what we try to do as a ministry. People write in questions. Here's a guy with an honest question, right? How come we can't make unicorns? And so, so Keaton replies this way. Unfortunately, your friend's argument is logically invalid. To understand validity, please read Logic and Creation, especially the sections on validity and soundness. Or you can purchase Dr. Sarfati's lecture, Leaving Your Brains at the Church Door.
Great DVD.
Yeah. Here's an argument with the same form, and the conclusion obviously doesn't follow from the premises. So have a look at this. Number one, donkeys and horses have different numbers of chromosomes, but can produce offspring. Number two, horses and narwhals have different numbers of chromosomes. Number three, therefore horses and narwhals can produce offspring. That's the argument, right? Here's why it doesn't work logically.
Yeah.
Number one, sparrows and turkeys have different sizes and can lay eggs. Number two, hamsters and kangaroos have different sizes. Number three, therefore hamsters and kangaroos can lay eggs.
Right.
Obviously, the logic breaks down in that argument.
Exactly. See, one similarity doesn't mean they share everything in common.
Right.
Right. If donkeys and horses can breed, that only shows that having the same number of chromosomes is not a necessary condition for breeding. But it doesn't prove that having a different number of chromosomes is sufficient. It shows that some animals with mismatched chromosomes can hybridize, but not all can.
Right.
Successful reproduction depends on a whole lot of complicated biological factors, so you just can't tell whether two groups of animals can hybridize just by counting their chromosomes. There's actually a butterfly that has over 84 different chromosome arrangements, but it's still the same kind of butterfly. And we've talked about that before, the number of chromosomes. Even people don't always have the same amount of chromosomes.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than just if you have the same number of chromosomes you can reproduce. It's a little more than that.
And also, you know, if crossing a horse and a narwhal could really produce a unicorn, then why hasn't anyone done it? As a matter of fact, in the response, you know, Keaton said, "I'd pay to see a real unicorn." So
yeah, I probably would too. My daughters would want to see it anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, really, this example doesn't really prove the fellow's point.
Yeah. Creation Magazine Live. Obviously, we are based on Creation Magazine. That's what we're doing on the show. When Calvin and I write these shows, a lot of the information we're getting that you're hearing on this program comes from Creation Magazine articles over the past 35 years and more. And so you can get a free copy of Creation Magazine, a free digital copy. Go to creation.com/freemag and get your free copy. You can get a free sample copy there. Read the whole thing. There's links in there. And enjoy that free magazine, and we'll see you next week.